Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This incident exploded in March 2023 during the post-pandemic return to office transition. It would probably be recognizable to people I work with. Hopefully they don't frequent these forums. It's a story about someone whose ambition exceeded their ethics and the law, and how it backfired spectacularly. It's a bit long, but worth the read. At the time, I was working as a team lead at a growing tech company. I had recently been assigned a new member to my team. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah was in her mid-20s and had graduated from an online program during COVID. She was the type who could spend hours telling you about her innovative ideas and groundbreaking projects, but somehow never had any concrete results to show. During our weekly team meetings, she'd dominate the conversation with elaborate plans, but when clients started complaining about missed deadlines and unanswered emails, she always had an excuse ready. "The client is impossible to work with," she'd say, or "I've been swamped with other priorities," or my personal favorite, "I definitely sent that email. It must have gone to their spam folder." After one particularly frustrating monthly review, I called her into my office. "Sarah, we need to talk about your project management," I said, trying to keep my tone professional but firm. She crossed her arms. "What about it?" "When tasks aren't getting done, you need to let us know so we can redistribute the workload. The whole team is affected when deadlines are missed." "It's not my fault if clients don't check their spam folders," she muttered. "Look," I said, leaning forward, "I'm not starting any formal performance review process, but from now on, I want you to check in with me every Monday morning for 10 minutes. We'll go over your weekly objectives and see if you need support with anything." She nodded, but her eyes told a different story. If looks could kill, I'd have been 6 feet under. Part of my role included access to a company credit card. It wasn't in my name, but I could use it for office supplies or client expenses up to $500. The card was kept in an office I shared with Jake, another team lead. One afternoon, I got a call from accounting about some unusual charges. Netflix subscription, DoorDash orders, an Adobe Creative Suite subscription. I told them I knew nothing about these purchases and suggested checking with Jake. He was equally clueless. By Monday morning, I was sitting in the CEO's office, Michael, who was holding a stack of transaction records. "Care to explain these?" he asked, sliding the papers across his desk. My stomach dropped when I saw the details. The accounts were all registered to an email address that looked like mine, john.smith2023@company.com. "I don't understand," I stammered. "I haven't made any of these purchases." Michael sighed. "You signed an agreement about appropriate card usage. This is a serious breach of trust." Walking out of his office, my job hanging by a thread, I found Sarah waiting by my door wearing a smirk that would make the Cheshire Cat jealous. "Ready for our morning check-in?" she asked sweetly. "Not today, Sarah. Something's come up." "Oh? Won't be here tomorrow either?" She tilted her head innocently. "Why wouldn't I be?" She just shrugged and walked away, sipping her morning coffee. The pieces started falling into place when I called DoorDash support. The delivery address was just around the corner from Sarah's apartment. One quick check with IT revealed that email address logged into her work laptop. That evening I called Michael. "You need to see this," I said, and had our IT lead confirm my findings. The next morning, Sarah walked into Michael's office confident and left in tears. As she passed through the hallway, I made sure to be there, deliberately sipping my coffee. "Karma's a funny thing, isn't it?" I said quietly as she passed. That night, I sent a farewell gift to her address, a DoorDash delivery of her favorite lunch order that I'd seen her get so many times. Paid with my personal card, of course. Michael decided against involving the police, and I didn't push for it. Sometimes just winning is enough. I left for a better position that December, but I heard through the grapevine that Sarah had trouble finding work in our industry afterward. Revenge and justice really can be the same thing sometimes. The next one is an entitled people story. I never thought I'd have to deal with something like this, but here we are. I own a 15-acre vineyard in Northern California that's been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather started it in the 1950s, my father expanded it, and I took over operations about 8 years ago when my father retired. We produce premium wine grapes that we sell to several local wineries. Everything was peaceful until about 6 months ago when my new neighbor Mike moved in next door. He bought the 5-acre property that borders the eastern edge of my vineyard. At first, he seemed nice enough. We exchanged friendly waves and brief greetings when we saw each other. That all changed about 2 months after he moved in. I was out checking the vines one morning when Mike approached me with a stack of papers in his hand. "Morning, got something interesting to show you," he said, waving the papers. I've been going through the property records and it looks like I actually own about 50% of this vineyard. I stared at him in disbelief. Excuse me? Yeah, according to these old survey maps from the 1940s, the property line runs right through the middle of your vineyard. Half of these vines are technically on my land. I tried to stay calm. Mike, I don't know what maps you're looking at, but that's completely incorrect. This vineyard has been in my family for over 70 years. We have all the proper deeds and surveys showing the exact property boundaries. He shook his head. These are official county records. I've had my lawyer look them over. I'm not trying to cause problems, but I want access to patrol my portion of the property. There is no your portion of my vineyard, I said firmly. The property line is clearly marked by the fence line on the eastern edge. I'm happy to show you our current surveys and documentation. Look, he said, his tone getting aggressive. I'm trying to be reasonable here. I could take legal action, but I'm willing to work something out. I just want to be able to patrol my property and maybe get a percentage of the grape sales from my portion. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mike, there's nothing to work out. This is my vineyard, period. I'm not giving you access or any percentage of anything. He stormed off, muttering about lawyers. I immediately called my father to tell him what happened. That's ridiculous, my father said. We've got every survey and deed going back to when your grandfather bought the place. The property lines have never changed. I also called our family lawyer, James, who has handled all our business matters for years. He confirmed we had ironclad documentation of our property boundaries and advised me to gather all our paperwork just in case. A few days later, I was out working when I saw Mike trying to climb over our fence to enter the vineyard. Hey, what do you think you're doing? I yelled, running over. I told you! I have a right to patrol my property! He shouted back. You can't keep me out! Get off my fence right now or I'm calling the police, I warned him. He jumped down on his side and pulled out his phone. Fine, I'll call them myself. They can sort this out. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol cars pulled up. Mike immediately started telling the officers how I was denying him access to his property and showed them his old maps. Fortunately, I had brought all our documentation inside my truck after talking to our lawyer. I showed the officers our current surveys, property deeds, and tax records clearly showing the vineyard boundaries. Sir, one officer said to Mike after reviewing everything, these current legal documents clearly show this is all private property belonging to the vineyard. Your maps appear to be outdated surveys from before the current property lines were established. That's impossible, Mike sputtered. My lawyer said... If you have a property dispute, you need to handle it through civil court, the officer continued. But you cannot attempt to enter private property without permission. If you do so again, you could be charged with trespassing. Mike started arguing with the officers while I stood there trying not to smile. Finally, they told him to leave or he'd be cited for making a false report. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, Mike started a campaign of harassment. He called code enforcement multiple times, claiming we were violating agricultural regulations. We weren't. He complained to the county about our spray schedule, which was fully permitted. He took photos of our workers and claimed we had illegal laborers. All our workers are legal and documented. He started running his tractor at 3 a.m. right along the fence line, trying to disturb us. He even flew a drone over the vineyard, taking pictures until I reported him for violating drone regulations. The final straw came when I caught him one evening actually cutting a hole in our fence. I had installed security cameras after his previous stunts, so I had clear video of him damaging our property. That's it, I told my wife that night. Time to end this nonsense. I contacted our lawyer again and we filed for a restraining order based on the ongoing harassment and property damage. We had extensive documentation of every incident, including police reports, code enforcement records showing his false complaints, security footage, and witness statements from our workers. The judge granted a temporary restraining order requiring Mike to stay at least 100 feet from our property line, except to access his own home. We also sued him for the cost of repairing the fence and legal fees. Meanwhile, I did some digging into those old maps he had shown. Our lawyer discovered they were actually crude, hand-drawn sketches from the 1940s, before proper surveys were done. They had no legal standing whatsoever. Mike's lawyer turned out to be his cousin, who had once taken a real estate class. We had our court hearing last week. Mike tried to present his maps again, but the judge wasn't having it. Sir, these drawings have no legal validity. The current property boundaries are clearly established by modern surveys and deeds. Furthermore, your pattern of harassment and property damage is completely unacceptable. The judge granted a permanent restraining order and ordered Mike to pay $12,000 in damages and legal fees. One more thing, the judge added. If you continue this behavior, you will face criminal charges. Do you understand? Mike nodded sullenly. As we left the courthouse, his wife was waiting outside. I overheard her yelling at him, "I told you to drop this months ago. Now look what you've done. We're out thousands of dollars because you couldn't leave well enough alone." Since then, things have gotten interesting. Mike put his house up for sale just 2 weeks after the court hearing. Apparently, his wife gave him an ultimatum. Either they move or she was leaving him. She was completely mortified by his behavior and couldn't handle the reputation they'd developed in our small agricultural community. I actually felt a bit bad for her. She stopped by one day while Mike was at work to apologize. "I'm so sorry for everything my husband put you through," she said. "He's always had this thing about wanting to own farmland, but we could never afford it. When he found those old maps in the county records office, he convinced himself he'd struck gold. I told him he was crazy, but he wouldn't listen." "No hard feelings," I told her. "I'm just glad it's over." But it wasn't quite over yet. Word had gotten around about Mike's attempted land grab, and local realtors were having trouble selling his property. Nobody wanted to buy a house next to a vineyard with a history of boundary disputes, even though we made it clear the matter was legally settled. After 3 months on the market with no serious offers, Mike tried one last desperate move. He had his cousin, the fake lawyer, send us a letter offering to settle all claims if we would buy his property at above market value. I had to laugh when I showed the letter to our real lawyer, James. "The audacity of this guy is amazing," James said, shaking his head. "He tries to steal half your vineyard, loses in court, and then wants you to bail him out by overpaying for his property." "Should we make him a lowball offer just to twist the knife?" I joked. "Actually," James said thoughtfully, "that might not be a bad idea, but for legitimate business reasons. That property would give you a nice buffer zone and room for expansion. And given their situation, you might get it for a very good price." He had a point. We'd been considering expanding our operation, and that 5 acres would be perfect for a new tasting room and visitor center. Plus, it would prevent any future neighbor issues. So we had James draft a formal offer at 30% below market value, citing the documented boundary dispute as a factor affecting property values in the area. Mike initially rejected it outright, but after 2 more months with no other offers, his wife finally convinced him to accept. We closed on the property last week. The look on Mike's face when he had to sign the papers selling to us was priceless. His wife actually seemed relieved it was all over. The best part? We found those original maps Mike had used in a drawer while cleaning out the house. Turns out they weren't even official county records. They were rough sketches made by a previous owner who had apparently been considering buying additional land back in the 1940s, but never did. Mike had built his whole claim on literally nothing. We're planning to renovate the house into a guest cottage for wine tourists and build that tasting room we've been wanting. The extra land will also give us space for some experimental grape varieties we've been interested in trying. My father got a good laugh out of the whole thing when it was all over. "Your grandfather always said we should try to buy that property someday," he told me. He'd be tickled to know we finally got it because some fool tried to steal the vineyard and ended up having to sell to us at a discount. The local farming community has gotten quite a kick out of the story, too. At the last Wine Growers Association meeting, someone actually presented me with a framed copy of Mike's ridiculous hand-drawn survey map as a joke gift. It's hanging in our office now as a reminder that sometimes the craziest situations can work out in your favor if you stand your ground and handle things the right way. As for Mike and his wife, I heard they moved to Arizona. Apparently they bought a house in a suburban development with a strict homeowners association. No agricultural properties anywhere nearby. Probably for the best. Our vineyard is peaceful again. We've expanded our property, and this whole saga has become just another funny story in our family business's history. I guess the moral is, don't try to steal someone's farm based on some old drawings you found in a drawer. It might just cost you your own property in the end. Update 6 months later. The renovation of Mike's old house into a guest cottage is complete, and our new tasting room is under construction. The business is doing better than ever. Turns out having a boundary dispute victory story actually makes for great marketing. People love hearing about how we defended our family vineyard while touring the property. We've also planted 2 acres of new experimental grape varieties that we're excited about. The extra land has given us room to try some interesting new things without risking our main production. The best unexpected outcome? Mike's wife actually reached out to us recently. They're getting divorced, and she wanted to thank us for inadvertently helping her realize she needed to make a change. Apparently, the vineyard incident was just one example of his pattern of trying to get rich quick through questionable means. She's much happier now, and we even hired her as our tasting room manager. Turns out she has extensive hospitality experience and really knows her wines. Sometimes I look at that framed survey map in our office and just shake my head. Who could have predicted that one neighbor's ridiculous scheme would end up helping us expand our business and make a good friend in the process? Life is funny that way. The next one is a malicious compliances story. A bit of background. I used to work at a popular grocery store that's known for rolling over for customers. I started working for this grocery store during my gap year, before college. I wanted to save up some money before taking on the crippling burden that is student loans. When I started, the job was easy enough and the vast amount of people were kind. I didn't have to deal with a lot of Karens and the hours were flexible. I really enjoyed my coworkers and managers. Life seemed great. That is until our department got a new boss. I don't know what it is about new bosses, but they always have to go on a power trip to consolidate power and to show everyone they mean business. Our Karen manager went around the department and started criticizing people for the stupidest things. Even if we were doing our job correctly, she would show up and tell us to work faster and we were stealing company time. We all hated her, but she is our boss, so we just tried to do what we were told. I pride myself on finding the quickest and most efficient way to do a job. Thanks for the upbringing, Mom. I applied this to any of my duties for the day. It just so happened that the end of the day was coming up, and we had to return products that customers left behind, non-perishable, of course. I was voluntold to go do it. This wasn't an issue as I had done this plenty of times before. I went about my task and finished in about 10 minutes. The second I got done, my KM called me into her office, and the following conversation ensued. Karen manager: close the door. Now, do you know why I called you in here? Me: no? Karen manager: I am trying to improve efficiency in the department, and you took way too long to do those go-backs. I won't tolerate people slacking off in my department. Do you understand? Me: I wasn't slacking off, trying to defend myself. I was just cutting me off, she reiterated. Karen manager: do you understand? Knowing I was being railroaded, I just sighed and said yes. Karen manager: to ensure you don't slack off again, you are forbidden from doing any more go-backs. I don't care if the store manager tells you otherwise. This is my department and you will do as I say. I'm the boss. I get a smile on my face as I realize what she just said. I nod my head and reply, me: understood. I won't do go-backs no matter what. My Karen manager replied with an umbrage smile and said, Karen manager: good, now go back to work and don't forget what I said. I'm the boss. I turned around so she couldn't see my crap-eating grin and said, me: don't worry, message received loud and clear. A few days go by without incident until I finally get a chance to put my malicious compliance into action. The front desk supervisor seems that the go-back cart is full and asked me to return the products. I smile and say, me: sorry, supervisor. Karen manager said I was wasting time and I am no longer allowed to return products. The supervisor gives me a weird look but just shrugs and tells another coworker to do it instead. This cycle continues on for the next month. One day, the store manager happens to be manning the front desk. The end of the day rolls around and he looks at me and says, store manager: hey, OP, we have a lot of go-backs and I need you to return them. Me: sorry, store manager, I'm not allowed to do go-backs anymore on account of slacking off. Store manager looks frustrated and says, store manager: I don't care if you are allowed to or not, I am telling you to take these back. Me: sorry. Store manager: Karen manager told me I am not to do any more go-backs no matter what, and I'd better follow her orders. Karen manager told me that this is her department and that she is the boss. Store manager looked pissed and stormed into the manager's office. A few minutes later, store manager called Karen manager to his office over the intercom. Karen manager came waddling out of her office and went into store manager's office. The door closed and we could all hear muffled yelling. After about 10 minutes, the door opened and Karen manager shuffled out. She glared daggers at me and told me to come to her office. I happily complied and said, me: yes, Karen manager, how can I be of assistance? Karen manager: you are allowed to do go-backs again. That is all. I smirked and left her office, happy that I could put a Karen in her place. The next one is an entitled people's story. I feel like since my friends and family know I won't hurt anyone, they should let me distance myself for months and months at a time, no questions asked. They're only allowed to message me when they need something, never for anything so unnecessary and time-consuming as hanging out just to sit around and do nothing of importance, like relaxing. I can do that at home, alone. As a friend, I'm there to help, not hang out. That's my job. My friends are not allowed to ask me anything important. I will shut them down immediately, because I refuse to trauma dump or tell them anything important or anything bad that's happening to me. What goes on in my life is not their problem, so I'm not going to burden them. But as their friend, I welcome them to trauma dump, if they'd like. I don't pry or ask them questions, as I feel that's incredibly inappropriate. It's not my place or my business to know anything. When I shut down, I demand something in return. I demand to be left alone. I am proud to say my friendships are transactional. They get the unlicensed therapist friend who listens and gives occasional solicited advice, and I get the peace, quiet, and solitude I desperately, desperately, desperately need. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.